What's up, y'all? Deathload is here. I'm back with another Eversoul video. This time I wanted to do a general thoughts and overview of Daphne, the latest fairy soul that was just introduced. Now, if you would like to learn more about other fairy type souls, I did make a guide that goes into detail of what each fairy soul does and what are their strengths and weaknesses, and I also gave them a rating. You can pause this video, check out the description down below, and I have a link to that fairy soul type guide. Or you can continue watching this video and I'll have a info card at the end that'll direct you to that video. So let's get into the details of Daphne. Daphne is a defender with the gear type of strength. She specializes in AoE. For her skills, we'll start by talking about her passive, Artisan Spirit. When Daphne's HP is completely depleted, this passive procs, which removes all debuffs on her, grants her a immunity to crowd control and knockback effects, while also preventing her from being incapacitated for up to 12 seconds. Upon the end of the effect, Daphne recovers 100% of the damage she received as HP. At higher levels, this gets an added effect of whenever Daphne uses her normal attacks, she destroys the target's armor by 3% for 15 seconds, and this stacks up to 10 times. The next prominent skill would have to be Daphne's sub-ability, Blacksmith's God's Blessing. Daphne casts a buff on all of her allies, including Daphne, with the Blacksmith's God's Weapon, which increases their attack for 15 seconds. Daphne also applies the Blacksmith God's Armor effect on herself that absorbs damage equal to a percentage of her max HP for 15 seconds. This percentage is dependent on how far you have her leveled up. At higher levels, this Blacksmith God's Armor gets an added effect of if it expires or is removed, she restores 25% of her HP. Now on to Daphne's artifact. Daphne, upon entering the battle, she receives a damage decrease buff that improves per each rank up of her artifact. Also, the Blacksmith God's Armor gets an additional 14% decrease in damage buff applied to it. At Legendary Plus, this added effect gets improved, and also at Origin. Now on to Daphne's final sub-ability. It is called Binding Will. Basically, Daphne grants all of her allies a special shock absorption buff that absorbs a percentage of damage for 15 seconds. 50% of this damage is stored for Daphne to use with her main ability. Daphne's main ability is called Shock Release. She targets the nearest enemy, deals a decent amount of damage, stuns anyone within a 2.5 meter range for up to 3 seconds. If Daphne had the Shock Absorption buff, she releases this buff and all the damage that she accumulated during the time she absorbed all that damage and converts it into additional damage on the enemy. Last but not least is Daphne's ultimate. Daphne targets the nearest enemy, deals a decent amount of damage in a 5 meter long 120 degree angle. Also, depending on how low Daphne's HP is, she deals additional damage depending on her current HP status. She also stuns the targets for up to 3 seconds. Now my thoughts on Daphne is I feel that she is definitely a very good tank that will carry many party formations. I also feel that Daphne outputs a lot of damage because of her shock absorption buff, synergizing with her main ability. I've used her up to stage 25 of the Depths towers that were newly released, and this basically pits me against enemy souls with artifacts, keepsakes, and ultimates. The content is quite difficult, not for the average audience, so I think it's a good starting point to test Daphne as far as PvE is concerned. We haven't had a single target or boss raid encounter yet to test her out, but I do feel that she's going to have the potential of dishing out a lot of damage because of her shock absorption buff that she has. But time will tell, and currently many of the players, including myself, are testing Daphne out. People have attributed her to being similar to Chloe. However, I feel that Chloe has her niche and so does Daphne. The stark differences between Chloe and Daphne is that Chloe is still more defensive than Daphne. Most of Daphne's damage mitigation actually comes from her artifact. Chloe also has the added benefit of having one of the best taunts in the game that taunts all enemies, and sadly, Daphne doesn't have a taunt. Now onto the passive comparisons. While Daphne is incapable of being incapacitated for a very long time, she's also susceptible to getting the blacksmith endurance buff removed from her via a debuffer, just like how Chloe is also susceptible to this. Now the thing that stands out more prominent between Chloe and Daphne would have to be Daphne's supportive capabilities. Daphne provides the attack increase buff for all of her allies. Also, she grants her allies with the shock absorption buff, which makes Daphne take a percentage of the damage that your allies would have received, and then converts this into her main ability. And let me tell you something, that main ability, when she absorbs a lot of damage from her allies, does a ton of damage. Now my thoughts on her ultimate is, I'm sure most of you think that her ultimate is extremely good and should be used. However, upon testing, I found out that her ultimate is just like any other Defender Soul's ultimate. You just won't ever use it. And only when she is the last person standing. It definitely deals the most damage compared to the other Defender Souls out there, but not enough to overshadow a damage dealer's ultimate. Well, anyways, that's my thoughts and opinions on Daphne's skills and playstyle. I'm sure you're wondering on my thoughts on whether you should pull on Daphne. And unfortunately, this isn't an easy question to answer for all of you, since everyone's account is different as far as spending goes and your current situation with the souls you have unlocked. But what I can tell you is that she definitely is worthwhile to get to at least Legendary Plus. The nice thing about Daphne is because of her passive and the fact that she cannot be incapacitated, this is a huge plus over someone like Chloe. Chloe, for example, can still die if she takes too much damage. However, Daphne, because she can't be incapacitated, means that just slotting in her in your party means that you're going to have a Defender Soul for up to 12 seconds, soaking up a ton of damage, hopefully buying your damage dealing souls enough time to accumulate mana and get their main abilities out before Daphne succumbs to her wounds. Another piece of advice for pulling: when it comes to pulling prioritization, you firstly want to pull for a damage dealer, followed by a defender or tank, and after would be a supportive soul. The only exception to the supportive soul ruling would be a melee supportive soul like Catherine, Clara, and Siha. These souls, because of their melee range, are susceptible to taking more damage than a low range or max range support soul. Having those souls at a higher ascension level would definitely help them in surviving the onslaught of damage that they could potentially take. Now on to my general thoughts of how Daphne looks and her love story. Daphne's normal costume actually looks pretty nice. I think the only complaint I would have is maybe just the hair color. That's only personal preference. I'm not a really big fan of green, especially green hair. But other than that, it's a solid 8 out of 10 outfit, in my opinion. Her love story costume, on the other hand, I feel that doesn't really fit what a blacksmith would wear on an outing. It's an odd choice, akin to what a princess would wear. While stereotypical, I feel that a Darndl outfit would have fit Daphne better, or something of similar European influence. Apart from that, it's a pretty basic costume, similar to how I felt about Erica's and Valana's outfit. Now, as for Daphne's love story, I had an inkling that Daphne's love story was going to be a typical cliche anime or gacha love story. I'm sure we all know what I'm talking about. A lot of these characters in these animes or gacha games, especially the ones that are, overemphasized in a specific feature, they tend to be a bit ditzy of sorts, and they don't have the knowledge of understanding how extremely attractive they are, or they're very emotional in how they feel towards someone else, but can't share it because they don't know how to share it. When emotional, they tend to be a bit clumsy as well. We've seen similar love stories before, not exactly the same, but around the same vein, with Jade, Xiaolian, Honglan, and Ayame of sorts. It wasn't too bad of a love story, although I do feel that I will forget about it because of how cliche it was. I just hope that Naya doesn't fall victim to the cliche love story tropes that most of these stories fall victim to. So, those are my general thoughts, opinions, and overview of Daphne. I think she is a much needed Defender Soul that Eversoul absolutely needed, and she's a welcome addition to the roster. And I do believe that Daphne will help many players out in further progressing into the game. I wish I could go more into detail like I did with my fairy type guide with the ratings and pros and cons. However, Daphne is still a fresh soul that just came out, so I hope you understand that more time is needed to test her out in order to come to a final conclusion on that. I thank you all for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and don't forget to leave a comment on your general thoughts on Daphne or on whether you're going to be pulling for her or not. And I hope to see you guys again on my next video. Have a nice day, and bye-bye!